Are you looking for a budget-friendly 35mm f1.4 for your Sony full-frame camera? This lens might be for you. Let's go. Alrighty. Oh, my hair looks a bit weird. Okay, let's start. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are doing well. My name is Jonathan and I'm from Singapore, and today I have with me the Samyang 35 f1.4 autofocus lens for the Sony full-frame camera. And boy must I say, I did not regret getting this lens at all. There's something about shooting at 35mm that just feels right and feels good to me. So let's just start with a brief introduction of this lens. Let's go. Alright, number one, don't ever do that. This lens is designed for the Sony full-frame E-mount cameras such as the A7 and A9 series of Sony cameras. Alright, the second thing about this lens is it is a prime lens. That means you cannot zoom in and out using this lens. It has a fixed focal length of 35mm, which is a typically good focal length for portrait photography. The third thing about this lens, it is entirely made out of, I don't think it's metal, I think it's a hybrid of metal and plastic, right? Because the only thing that is plastic is the lens hood and the cover as well. But the rest of the lens, it sounds pretty solid, but it looks like metal, but it sounds like plastic, so I'm not very sure. But generally, the build quality is really good. It feels solid in the hands. Number 4, this lens weighs about 645 grams, which is pretty significant for a lens. It's pretty bulky actually. Also, it has a common 67mm filter thread size, and hence you can use ND filters or Promise filters if you wish to do so. Also, it has autofocus, and lastly, the fastest aperture goes down to f1.4, which is insane. Which leads us to our next point, why you should get this lens. Let's go. Alright, why would you get this lens? Firstly, I would say this. The fact that this lens allows you to shoot at a 1.4 aperture, it is a premium feature. Usually, affordable prime lenses only allows you to shoot at 1.8, the fastest, but this lens goes further and it allows you to shoot at 1.4, which is just crazy. This means that you're able to get the 1.4 shallow depth of field, and get that cinematic background blur and subject isolation from your shots. So this is why you should get this lens. The second reason why you should get this lens is because it is relatively affordable when compared to its Sony counterpart. The Sony Zeiss 35 1.4 costs a whopping 2.2k Singapore dollars first hand, and that is just insane. Interestingly enough, I got this lens for 600 Australian dollars, which at that time it cost about 550 Singapore dollars, and it's my baby, it feels good. Feels good to use. Oh, I shouldn't do that. Feels good to use. Another lens that you can consider is the Sigma 35 1.4 for the Sony E-mount as well, and it will run you about 900 Singapore dollars. Alright, the third reason why you should get this lens is because the image quality, in my opinion, it looks good. Personally, for me, I don't go and pixel peep, every single photo that I take, or whether it's sharp, whether it's soft. To me, it looks good enough. It doesn't look soft at all. Most of the time, it looks pretty sharp, and I'm happy with how my image turns out. Alright, the fourth reason why you should get this lens is because it is an extremely versatile lens. Being a 35mm focal length, you can take portraits. In fact, the 35mm is extremely popular for portrait photography. If you want to take landscapes, you can in fact take landscapes, although you would want something wider, but 35 is actually more than enough, I think. And for a period of time, I was taking this 35mm focal length lens, going around the streets of Singapore and taking pictures. And for street photography, I think this lens, it plays the part. Here's some pictures. Okay. This lens becomes more versatile when paired with a Sony camera such as the A7 III. When the APS-C mode crop is activated, this lens literally becomes a 50mm equivalent, 1.4 on a full-frame camera, which makes this lens even more versatile. So the last reason why you should get this lens is because of its autofocus. For photography, I think it's extremely fast. For videography, it is extremely smooth. Then again, how good the autofocus is very subjective, right? To some people it is bad, to some people it's good enough, to others it might be perfect for them. To me personally, I would say that the autofocus is good enough. Alright, so I've told you why you should get this lens. On the flip side, these are some reasons why you might not want to get this lens. Number one, it is pretty bulky and pretty heavy, right? So if you're transporting it from one place to another, it might get a bit tiring for you. But if weight and bulkiness is not an issue to you, this lens is perfect for you then. Alright, the second reason why you might not want to get this lens is because if you are going to shoot at 1.4 aperture all the time, an ND filter is usually needed, especially during the day. So along with this lens, an ND filter is a must as well. The third reason why you might not want to get this lens is because 35mm is not wide enough if you want to do vlogging. If you want to use this lens for vlogging, this is how it would look like. It looks really bad for vlogging. The last reason why you might not want to get this lens is because in my experience using it, right, sometimes I can hear the sound of the autofocus focusing, right, and it sounds like this. Yeah, so right now I'm just going to share with you what I've learned using this lens and who is this lens for. Let's go. Alright, the first thing I want to say is this. Shooting at f1.4 is a luxury. Just because you can shoot at f1.4 does not mean that you should always shoot at f1.4. When I first got my hands on this lens, I had the bad habit of shooting everything in 1.4. Slowly I learned that in certain situations, shooting at f1.4 would actually cause parts of my image that I wanted it to be in focus to be out of focus due to its extremely shallow depth of field. So the second thing that I learned using this lens is that it is actually pretty heavy. It is very bulky to be carrying it around. And this is my advice. Even though 1.4 is a bokeh beast and it does give you a blurry background, a very smooth blurry background, most of the time 1.8 is more than enough. So if you're worried about the weight and the bulkiness and the portability of using a 35mm lens, I would sacrifice one stop of light and go for the 1.8 version of this lens. Be it the same brand, be it the Sony, I would opt for the 1.8 because it is lighter and more compact and easier to transport from place to place. However, if you're like me and you can tell the slight difference between a 1.4 and a 1.8, and if 1.4 looks better to you, go for the 1.4. Yeah. The third thing that I've learned is this, right? It is really value for money, right? Compared to the Sony counterpart, which is the Sony Zeiss 35 1.4, which costs 2.2k Singapore dollars, it is just insane. And for its performance right now, I think I paid a very good price for this lens. Hence, if you don't want to be breaking your bank account, you can opt for this lens because this lens is really value for your money. So it is not suited for vlogging, it is suited in my eyes for more documentation, filmmaking and storytelling, you know, and for B-roll stuff as well. If you want to shoot detailed shots, you know, B-roll sequences, this lens is actually pretty good for it. And to be honest, I was very tempted to sell this lens for the 24-70 f2.8 because recently I think 2.8 is more than enough. I think I'll be keeping this lens because I'm really liking it. So maybe in the future what I can do is this, right? I would own the 24-70 f2.8 and that would be the versatile lens because, you know, you can go wide at 24 and you can go zoomed in at 70, and this 35 1.4 can be my B-roll lens, you know, the more artistic kind of shots. You know, I can turn this into 50mm 1.4, which helps me a lot. Alright, so we have come to the end of the video. If you're still here watching, I just want to say that I really appreciate you. And if you found it informative, if you found it educational, and if you liked the video, do give it a like and subscribe for similar content like this. Until the next one, I'll see you guys. Bye.